All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating cinematic essay framework, and we're pulling this straight from two incredibly profound source texts, Dante King's The 400-Year Holocaust and Dr. Amos Wilson's Black on Black Violence. Now, if you're a Black creative, a film student, or a cultural critic, you're going to want to hear this. These texts dig deep into the historical and psychological roots of Black rage, and together they make a really compelling argument. This rage, it's not some kind of malfunction. It is a completely legitimate political and artistic inheritance. So let's start by holding a mental freeze frame of the legendary director Spike Lee. When you look at a filmography that spans from Do the Right Thing to Malcolm X all the way to Black Klansman, critics are constantly asking one central question. Why is he still angry? I mean, why is this brilliant, highly successful director so famously, unapologetically enraged? Well, to really understand that answer, the authors suggest we need to look closely at the archive he's actually building.
And Dante King tells us that the answer really starts right here. He points to the iconic final moments of Spike Lee's film School Days, where the characters issue the simple yet incredibly powerful mandate, wake up. King uses this specific cinematic moment as a call to action. He's reporting that systemic anti-Blackness runs so deep in our institutions and, honestly, in our psyches, that society simply has to wake up to this reality.
Section 1. The Blueprint of Whiteness. Designing the Racial Caste System. Okay, to truly grasp this, King notes that we have to pivot from cinema over to history and examine how the whole concept of whiteness was actually constructed. Because before the term white was even widely used in law, identifiers like Christian or English were what denoted freeborn status. But then, look at 1640. During the Hugh Davis case, a white male was whipped specifically for, quote, defiling his body by lying with a Negro woman. It was a literal form of statutory conditioning. And by 1705, the text shows us how these rules officially transitioned into formalized, legalized whiteness. Drawing on scholars like Theodore Allen and Cheryl Harris, King breaks it down for us. He outlines that this legal and economic blueprint ensured the racial caste system was a calculated design right from the colonial period onward. In these texts, whiteness isn't just some vague social construct. It's explicitly defined as a ruling class social control formation. It operates as literal property. It establishes exclusivity, power, and the moment-to-moment subjugation of Black people. So King argues that once you understand the system is functioning exactly the way it was designed to, an artist's rage suddenly emerges as a highly predictable, entirely rational response.
Section 2. Pathologizing Black Rage. Displaced aggression versus systemic reality.
Now we step into the psychological side of things with Dr. Amos Wilson. He provides this rigorous examination of how that completely rational rage we just talked about gets tragically pathologized by society. He makes a really uncompromising claim here regarding criminality. Wilson argues that white American society actively provokes, even seduces, the African male into criminality as a way to project its own repressed guilt. By constantly defining the Black male as criminal, the dominant culture basically gets a free pass to avoid acknowledging its own historical and ongoing systemic crimes. But think about it. What actually happens to the rage that just can't be safely directed at an oppressor? Dr. Wilson defines this psychological mechanism as displaced aggression. The source material explains that when you feel total powerlessness before an intimidating, massive systemic structure, it redirects legitimate anger inward. People end up finding substitute targets within their own community simply because it carries less risk of devastating retaliation. In his text, Wilson asserts that the angry black-on-black criminal attacks his fellow victims because he's essentially possessed by what Wilson terms the white, racist, introjected devil. It's this internalized oppressor directing the attack away from the actual persecutors straight onto the community itself. It is a tragic cycle, and it's fueled entirely by systemic powerlessness and a severe lack of ethnocultural respect. And this right here is the absolutely crucial point. Wilson draws a super stark contrast. On one side, you have destructive, displaced aggression, that reactive, intra-community violence that, honestly, ultimately just does the oppressor's work for them. But on the other side, we see the vital necessity of focused, legitimate political rage. This is the kind of anger that challenges systemic oppression head-on. It demands justice instead of attacking the community. Section 3. Cinema as Cultural Archive. Validating the rage through art. So jumping back to the cultural lens, how do you actually make that shift?
How do you move from misdirected frustration over to focused political rage? Well, the sources point us right back to Spike Lee. King uses Lee's school days to argue that cinema serves as this vital vault, a cultural archive for holding and validating legitimate anger. Lee's archive catalogs exactly how adopting white values diminishes identity. But putting all of this on a movie screen, he effectively redirects self-destruction into a brilliant artistic critique that is constantly issuing that call to wake up.
Section 4, the right to remember, mandates for waking up. Okay, so you're awake. What comes next? Dante King outlines some very uncompromising mandates for both sides of the racial divide to actually dismantle this 400-year framework. For white viewers, the text suggests seeking specialized therapy to actively disrupt white psychology, along with dismantling institutions built on superiority and directly redistributing resources. And for black viewers, the mandate is all about internal healing. It asks you to dismantle black selectivism, reject white value systems entirely, and fully embrace the unvarnished rage of leaders like James Baldwin and Malcolm X. Just look at this powerful quote from King's Dear Black People segment. It really highlights the massive scale of this systemic reality. King reports that white supremacy culture is inherently dependent upon anti-blackness. The functionality of the racial hierarchy isn't just some passive privilege. According to the text, it requires literal moment-to-moment dehumanization just to keep the engine running. To truly unlearn these structures, both Dr. Wilson and Dante King are completely aligned on one thing. Individuals must claim their right to remember. The sources urge audiences to remember the historical truth, remember those psychological mechanisms, and hold on to the unvarnished reality of the past 400 years. And you have to do it entirely without apology and without filtering it to make the dominant culture comfortable. Which leaves us with a final thought for all the creatives, the film students, and the critics watching this explainer today. The texts have laid out the blueprint of a caste system, and they've shown us how displaced aggression is designed to destroy communities from the inside out. But they also show us the way out, how artists use the screen to validate their anger and turn it into something undeniable. So the sources leave you with this challenge. If this rage is a legitimate, completely rational inheritance, what will you archive with your right to remember? How are you going to channel that power into your next great work?
Hey there, glad you stopped by. If you're feeling the vibe, stick around for a little while. Don't forget to like and subscribe, like and subscribe.